All right, Michael, looks like you're back. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The purpose of this is to just introduce you to what racing looks like at NICA in New Jersey. And for posterity, this is being recorded in February of 2023. So if we use this next year, there may be some small changes. So topics we're going to go over is how to register for a race and what your category is, what kind of resources there are to prepare for a race, what to bring, what a race venue looks like, pre-ride, staging, what the course looks like, important rules, strategy, scoring, volunteering, and where the coaches are. So kind of an open format here. So if you guys have questions or want to bring up something I'm not covering well, speak up. Okay, so first thing is category placement. So everybody who's registered to race gets placed in a category. If you're in middle school, the chances are extremely high that you are just placed in your grade level. And if you're looking at the share here, I've got an example here, a bunch of middle school boys placed in their grade. That's fine. And you can see that in Pit Zone. So parents, that system you log into for payment and legal is where you see the category. If you're in high school, it's possible that you're not placed in the category of your grade. It's possible that you're placed in something else. So we can see Sasha here is placed in JV4. All right, so other things you can see in Pit Zone is this little table here, which is not really labeled, but is got numbers across the top, 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. This is the events. These are the races. So 1 is the first race, 2 is the second, and so on. And you'll see that open means registration is open for that race. Closed, the ones that are closed because these are makeup dates, and those will be used if there's a weather event. All right, so that's Pit Zone. I'm going to pause just for a second in case there's questions about what Pit Zone and category placement looks like. Okay, so staying in Pit Zone, registering for a race is a $0 transaction. So when you registered for the season, you also paid for all the races. However, registration for the races enables the race officials to do a bunch of planning, which makes the races go a lot better. So if you're going to race, you do want to register. You just click this box and say yes, and it'll do a $0 transaction. You get a receipt for $0. And what that does is telling the league that, yeah, I'll be there, and they'll count you appropriately as they kind of set up the waves and the starting orders and stuff like that. If you're not going to go to the race, please don't register. I'll pause there briefly if there's any questions. Okay. Here and no. All right, so race resources. So it's not up for this year, but a typical race has a bunch of supporting materials around it, which enable you to plan a little bit. So there's a race flyer. This is a little PDF document. I recommend everyone, download that to your phone because that tells you what's happening the day of. There's a PDF course map, right? PDF is just like a document format, a Strava course map, and the GPX. So even if you've never been to the venue, you can look at the maps if you want to and see things like how long is the loop. You can, superimpose the map onto a terrain map and see like where the climbs are. Look at satellite view, you can see where you're on a road, which would probably be a great passing area as opposed to like a single track segment. Last is this sign up link. So the races take a lot of labor to run. So if you're a parent who's going to be there and you're so inclined, you have the ability to sign up for any number of 10 or 20 volunteer positions for the day. And those help make the race run. All right, going to pause again before we talk about the race flyer in detail. Okay, race flyer. This is what a race flyer looks like. You can see the red arrows are pointing to times that you can pre-ride the course. So this lets you go out on the course, do a lap or two if you want, so that it's familiar to you when you're actually racing on it. You do not have to pre-ride, but you can if you want to. If you're pre-riding morning of, definitely want to loaf because you want to save gas in the tank for the actual race. Okay, moving down to the green arrow, you can see the categories. These are the categories that come right out of pit zone. And you can see this number series next to the categories, like 4,000s. That's telling you that this category is going to have a race plate like 4001. And that's important so that you know who you're racing against. So it's completely possible that there might be multiple categories on the race course at a given time, but you're only racing against your category. So if you're an 8th grade boy, you're racing against anyone with a 4,000 race plate. Nobody else matters. All right, laps, blue arrow. Generally in middle school, you're going to be doing 2 laps. And then yellow arrow is your cutoff time. If you're doing 2 laps and you're having a really bad day, in this case, if you didn't do a lap in 25 minutes, you're going to skip the 2nd lap and just get pulled off the course. You don't have to think about it at all. There'll be somebody standing in the course to move you off. And I didn't put an arrow next to it. I should have. The start time. So this is pretty important. This is the time that you're going to start, and you want to show up for staging, which we're going to talk about in a minute, 20 minutes before your start time. And they're strangely specific. Like if you can't read this 8th grade boy wave starts at 9, and there's another one at 9:03, and that's real. So the waves do go off that close together, and they won't wait for you. So definitely want to be in your staging, in your category, and ready to go when the race starts, because it's going to start without you if you aren't there. So I'm going to pause for a moment there for questions. Not hearing any. All right, so this is what the rest of the race flyer looks like. Basically, you can see what everyone's race start times are, and you can see that the race ends sometime around 3, typically, at least on this day, and that's pretty typical. And after the race is complete, there's kind of a cleanup phase, and then there's the awards. So that's kind of the timing. All right. All right, so what to bring? So bring your bike, and bring your bike in working order. Bring your helmet, not racing without it. Bring your jersey. Nikki on this call has already sent out a reminder to actually order your jersey if you don't have one. That is a requirement for racing. Bring your race plate. If it's hot or cold, appropriate clothing so that when you're on the bike, you're comfortable, and when you're off the bike, you're comfortable too. Our first race is in April, and it might be beautiful, or it might be 35 degrees and windy. So plan for that. Bring food and water for yourself. We do have a tent that will be set up, and it's a long day. So, I suggest everyone make themselves comfortable. So bring a chair, your trumpet, your dog, homework, whatever it is that's going to make you comfortable for being pretty much outside for the day. What's usually there is there's usually porta-johns or kaibos if you're from the Midwest. There's usually some kind of garbage service, and there's usually a food truck, but it's a food truck, right? So if you got special dietary stuff, food truck's probably just going to have an egg and cheese sandwich. All right, any questions on this?
I was just going to say, if anybody who's on here, if you haven't ordered your jersey yet, the store is closing at midnight tonight, so make sure you order it.
Yes.
Although if you don't,
no jersey, no racy. Okay, great. Thank you, Nikki. All right, so what's a race venue look like? There's a couple places that you'll want to know about. There's typically an area called an infield, and that's in the green area here. This is kind of the best viewing. It's typically close to the start finish. It's typically also close to the tents. The red arrow here is the starting chute. So you don't actually start on the race course. You're going to start on or you're going to be staged in a chute that routes onto the race course. Our tent will be one of many, many tents set up near the infield area. You know, I'll bring the tent. I can't set it up by myself. It requires 4 people to set it up. So if you show up and there's a tent in a bag sitting there and on a piece of ground, go ahead and set it up, please. Excuse me. And then other things on the race course that most of you probably won't need is there's often a feed station and an aid station. If you're racing 2 laps, you probably won't touch any of those. Here's a picture of our team tent. I should mention parking. So these events are quite large. There's often 500 kids or more. And so the parking is a major factor. You know, wear shoes that you're going to be good with, walking a half mile or a mile in, because you might end up doing that to get from the parking area to the infield. Nikki, you look like you're going to say something. Nope.
No.
Okay. All right. Last item on getting familiar with the course is the timing pad, because this upsets some people. You see this inflatable arch here in the lower right? That's the start finish line. And across the ground there, if not barely visible in this picture, is the timing pad. So this is an electronic device that talks to the chip in your nameplate when you are starting and as you do each lap. And that is the basis for all of the scoring. Now, this is important because your race doesn't start or end until you cross that timing pad. So one of the things that will likely happen is the stager will try to organize the wave, which is the bunch of kids starting, into a group, and they'll try and put the fastest kids based on their previous lap times in front. Now, that does not mean they're getting any advantage, because their race doesn't start until they cross the timing pad, and yours doesn't start until you cross the timing pad. So literally, they can start you, some kids can go off, you could sit there for a minute, your race still hasn't started, and then you could go. So the kids who are being placed in front or called up, that's what it's called, called up, actually have no advantage. So don't get demoralized or upset about that. It all depends on when you cross that timing pad. Okay, any questions on that or what a race venue looks like? Okay, so just kind of refresh on the course pre-ride. This is typically on Saturday afternoon, the morning beforehand, or sorry, Saturday afternoon before the race or the morning beforehand. Totally optional. You do need to have your race plate on. So if you're making a special trip or whatever, you do need your race plate to get on the course. And the purpose of the pre-ride is not to go out and rip your fastest lap. It's to study the course. So pay attention to where it's steep, like where you're going to need to be in a easy gear, where it might be muddy, where there might be gravel, where there's tight turns, where there might be obstacles. That's what you're trying to do. So as you ride it, go slow and have your brain on and try and memorize important stuff. Let me just pause there because I think I've skipped a few slides without giving a Q&A opportunity. Any questions?
Does the team pre-ride together, or you just do it on your own?
You can totally do it on your own. So generally, we'll be in the tent and we'll go off as a group. But if for whatever reason that doesn't work for you, that timing doesn't work for you, you can totally go on your own. Okay. All right, let's talk about staging. All right, so staging is where you as a rider are set up with your category to be marched into the starting chute. All right, so this is a little bit of a chaotic process. So there will be in the staging area, which will be easy to identify because there'll be large bunches of kids standing around. There will be a race official, labeled race official, with a vest on them, probably screaming into a microphone to get you organized into your starting position. So they're going to start, you're going to be starting by your category, right, which is generally for middle school going to be your grade and your gender. And they may call up some number of people by name and place them at the front. Again, that doesn't matter for the results because the race starts not based on who's in front, but when you cross the timing pad. Biggest piece of advice, biggest thing to remember here is don't be in your highest gear or your most difficult gear when you're starting, because you're going to be starting from stops. So be in good starting gear and don't worry too much about the first 20 seconds of the race because you probably haven't even crossed the timing pad at that point. Anything else, Nikki, anything you'd want to add to staging? I know you've helped out the team on this area a lot.
No, just again, you're there with plenty of time.
Okay. Yep, that's good counsel. All right. Starting. So
Dave,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Alec was having an argument with me.
Oh.
The preference is pre-race as a team, correct?
Yeah, if you're able to get there and you don't have a timing problem, it'll be beneficial to you to pre-ride as a team, because what we'll do is I'll probably be there myself and we will stop and look at the course critically as we ride it. Like, this is a hill, you're going to need to be in a low gear and easy gear for climbing this. You know, this is a rough section. This is a great place for passing and so on. So yes, if you're able to be there at one of the times the team's pre-riding, that would be the best. But if you can't for whatever reason, there's nothing preventing you from going on your own.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Dave.
Okay. So starting, this is what starting looks like. So again, being a good gear, you're going to be in a little chute, and by chute I mean it's an area that's taped off with plastic boundary tape. And don't worry too much about if somebody's in front of you. It doesn't matter. What matters is your total time and their total time, and timing starts and ends at the timing pad. Okay. All right, so let me just make this even more clear. You can see in this picture, there's somebody holding a flag here. That is not actually when the race starts. All right, so that's what they're doing is they're starting people in the chute, and the race starts for each rider as they cross the timing pad. But it does give you the feeling of like a traditional foot race or something like that, where you're starting at the gun or starting at the flag or the tone. All right, the course. All right, so the course is generally in the 2 to 3 mile range per lap. This usually means, important for parents, like 15 to 20 minutes per lap. So if you're a parent and you're like, I want to see my kids go by, when they go by, you set your watch and probably they won't be by again for another 15 minutes unless they're blisteringly fast. Again, most of the middle schoolers are going to be doing 2 laps, which means the total race is going to be half hour, 45 minutes, something like that. We already talked about the cutoffs. This will depend on the exact race venue. You as riders don't have to think about it at all. If for whatever reason you're not making the cutoff, you'll just be directed off the course. Many of you have ridden Lewis Morris in practice. This is the hardest course in the race series. So it's got the most climbing and probably the most technical features. So you have an advantage in the sense that you're familiar with it and you've been training on one of the more challenging courses. Spectators, so do not be on the course. You can walk beside it. There's usually all kinds of routes to get to interesting places on the course without actually walking on the course. But do not walk on it. The riders might not be paying attention or expecting you, and some of them actually are coming through quite quickly, and you'll get hit, which would be bad. All right. So important rules. There is a 100-page rule book on the web for NICA. My guess is most of you will not read that, so we're going to just go over the big ones. Biggest one is to call your passes. We're going to practice this in our upcoming practices. And this is basically just shouting out, passing on your left. Left is the best place. All of the NICA courses have areas which are suspiciously good for passing, almost like they were designed that way, if they were. These would be areas like where you're riding on a road briefly, like a dirt road, and that usually that's a great place to pass because there's plenty of room. If you have a mechanical problem, try and fix it yourself. If there are marshals out on the course, if they need to help you, it's a 5-minute penalty, which is a pretty gigantic penalty. Single best thing you can do to manage your mechanicals is know how to put your chain back on, because this is a 5-second repair, and you can totally lose a chain in the race, put it back on, and still place very, very well. Whereas, if you blow a tire, you're probably not going to place that well. All right. Key strategies for the race. I always say this: you can't win going downhill, but it's pretty easy to crash. So the best place, and Nikki, you want to say something?
No, that's how I broke my collarbone racing downhill.
Yeah. So it's very hard to make up more than a few seconds going downhill. So the place you win is on the climbs and excelling at the climbing sections, ideally in passing areas. If you're out there on the course, it is totally possible that there will be sections where you can't safely pass. My son used to call this tea time. If you are at a race venue, you can see it happen. It's typically going to be in a single track section where no one is going significantly faster than anyone else, and there's no good way to pass. And you'll see 5 people packed together pretty tightly, maybe not even working that hard. So they might be talking or whatever. It's almost like the race takes a break until there's a passing area, and then it's back on again. So I do encourage everyone to pay attention to what's going on in other races as well, because you'll learn a lot about, especially watching the older, bigger kids, on how to get faster. All right. So scoring. Scoring is based on your placement, based on your actual time. So for middle school, that's not super important. It doesn't count towards the team score, and we're not really worried about the team score anyway. There is an awards ceremony where you get these groovy little podium shows, like I've got pictured here, that occurs after all the races, after the course is torn down. I do encourage everyone, if possible, to stay around to the end and help to take down the course. Again, it's about 500 hours of labor to put on one of these events. So if you're able, whether you're a parent or a kid, you're going to hear an announcement like, the race is over, please help tear down. And you'll see literally hundreds of people get up and start to pull stuff down and pack it into the trailers. So scoring results, again, if you're in middle school, don't worry too much about it. They're also going to be posted real time. There's typically a tent set up with some monitors. So if you're really curious where you placed and you need to see it right away, that's at the venue, and the results are also typically posted online. So you want to be a nerd and do all kinds of analysis about whether or not your first lap was slow or fast and how to compare to all your competitors, you can do that. Okay, volunteering. I mentioned before, there's a lot of labor in one of these events. There's a link added to the race event area on the NJ NICA website. If you're able to volunteer, it's appreciated. It's necessary in order to make these events work. So encourage all parents to volunteer. And if you're really a hero, I know that the most difficult to staff volunteer area is parking. So not the most exciting thing, but something has to happen or you don't have a race event.
Yeah, I feel like as a parent, like especially being a stationary course marshal is kind of like an easy thing to do, and then you can still kind of watch, the racers come by.
Right. So stationary course marshal, the role is bring your favorite lawn chair, and you'll be asked to go park at a specific spot on the race course with a radio and just report what you see. So you're still watching the race. Actually, you're going to see the race in great detail, but you're doing it typically out in the woods. Okay. All right. Pro tips: the race plate, the race number, are going to be issued at the end of March. They'll be issued to me, and I will give them to you, either at practice or at the race venue. Do not lose that, and do not put your bike on the back of your car or the top of your car with the race number on it. Once you get going a little fast, that race number will flutter and get ripped off, and it'll be gone, and then you'll have to buy a new one. So race numbers, good for the season. Have a chip in them. Don't leave it on the outside of your car because it'll go bye-bye. All right, coach support. So the coaches may or may not be in the tent. If they are there and not working the course, they will probably be in the tent. Speaking for myself, that's generally where I am. However, both myself and James are also marshals. So we may be out on the course when you're riding, which is fine. We'll say hi to you. But that means that you have to stage yourself, right? So we already went over the race flyer, what time the race starts, and you want to stage yourself, 20 minutes beforehand. If we're there, we're going to say, like, when are you starting? And, make sure you get over to the staging. We typically do have some spares with us. So a little bit of food, water, tools in case you have a mechanical incident, but you should come prepared for yourself, right? With your bike in working order and with the food and water you need. Don't rely on us to bring that. Okay. That is the end of the slides. So let me take any questions. And Nikki, anything
Coach.
I missed? Yeah.
Yeah, this is Milana, Alex mom. So is there a list of tools that they should have for self-repair on the course?
Yeah, so most people will carry just two things. One is a multi-tool, which has a bunch of Allen keys on it. Every bike shop has this sort of thing. And the other is whatever you need to fix the tires on your bike. And depending on the tire type you have, that might be a tubeless system or it might be a tube. So either one of those is fine.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, sure.
And
Nikki, I
then
missed.
in terms of schedule, do races generally start around the same time that you showed? Like the pre-races are in the late afternoon and the race itself is early morning, or does it kind of shift as the season goes on?
So generally they're lazy and they'll leave as much the same for every race as they can. So generally we are looking at like a 9 o'clock start and something like a 3:30 finish for all of the racing. But you really got to look at the race flyer because we've had like 2-day events which had dramatically different schedules. You can see on this particular example I'm sharing now, there's actually 2 waves of 8th grade boys because there's so many of them. And that's an example of where, like, if you've registered, like we talked about, registered for the race officials are going to look and say, like, we can't start 150 kids at one time. So we're going to break it up into separate waves. So you really do have to look at the race flyer, but generally, yeah, it's somewhere between 9 and 3. Right now, we have no plans for 2-day events this year.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. All right. Last call for questions.
Thank you. That was John, by the way, saying thanks.
I'm sorry, was that a question?